It is vlog 195, and the final day of 2022 featured a massive snowstorm hitting Reno, so New Year's Day ended up being the perfect time to fly to Vegas for Niners, Raiders, and of course some poker. By the way, I usually prefer to drive to Vegas, as you've seen on this vlog. Yes, it's 7 hours away, but it's an easy drive, and flying only saves you about 3 hours at the end of the day. But with this snow, I'm sure glad I flew this time. Aboard the Southwest Airlines jet headed down to Vegas, I decided to listen to this week's episode of the Crush Life Poker Podcast. It's been my go-to source for poker training material since 2010, and this week was a classic episode in terms of a concept you should know, and that is Fifth Street Chicken. It's the idea that discusses the tendency that players have to give up on the river when running multi-street bluffs. Obviously, it's not always reliable, but in a lot of live cash games, you'll find that it's something you'll see quite often. And funny enough, a hand that had taken place just before that flight when I was playing on the Carolina Poker Club on the ClubGG app showcased the concept. It came playing 1-2 six-handed when it folds to the small blind who makes it $8, and I have Jack-9 of clubs in the big blind and make the call. The flop comes 9-4 with a couple of hearts and one club, and he bets just over a quarter of the pot here. With top pair, I'm obviously going to be making this call. The turn is an offsuit 8, and now he decides to bet half the pot. That's a good bet to try to get me off of hands like ace-deuce or ace-4 here, but he probably knows it's going to take more than that to get me to lay down a 9 playing six-handed. So I make the call, and the river is the 5 of spades, and now he checks. Normally I do a lot of value betting here in live games, but assuming this guy was simply giving up the vast majority of the time and not wanting to get jammed all in on here, I decided to just check this back, and I win the pot against King Jack. Had he bet the river, there's no doubt that I'd have been in a tough spot. But as I thought it might, the Fifth Street Chicken concept shows itself off. If you're interested in learning more about that and other live poker material, you can always get 25% off for life just by going through the link in the description below. I'd fly into Vegas just a couple of hours before the game, and then I'd make my way over to Allegiant Stadium. It was a game featuring probably 60 to 65% 49er fans, and one lonely Eagle supporter from 30 years ago. It ended up being a very high-scoring affair with the Niners winning in overtime by a field goal, so a good start to this shorter-than-average Vegas trip. Alright, it is the 195th running of this vlog. The Niners got the win. Can I get a win to start 2023? There's 5 games going here at Aria. Let's jump into one of them. Amazingly enough, it wasn't my first time playing at Aria on January 1st. I did the same thing back in 2012, and boy, was my life a lot different then. I'd take a seat on table 24 in an 8-max game. I'd buy in for $1,500, which is something I like about the Aria room, but as much as I like that, I hate the way the room is set up to allow for cigarette smoke to just blow in constantly with no glass on the outer walls. I pick up pocket 9s playing 7-handed in the cutoff and make it 20. Folds to a young guy in the big blind who 3-bets to 65, and I make this call. So with 130 in, the flop is Jack 8-5 with a couple of hearts, and he bets the same amount again. Close spot here, but I figured that I needed to see what he would do on the turn, beating a lot of his 3-betting range still. And with 260 in, the turn pairs the 8. If he had a monster, it would have worked out well for him here had he checked, because my plan was to bet if he did so, but he didn't. He bet 130. If it was a player that I knew more about, I'd have a better feel for this spot, but those are the disadvantages of not having home field advantage. Though it sure felt like the 49ers did so in their game on that day. I'd get dealt ace-king 10 minutes later, 3-bet it on the button, get called, flop nothing, fire a c-bet, get called again, and lose the pot. You know, basically the usual. I change seats, I lose 2 more pots, and then I face a $15 hijack raise when I have ace-jack of hearts on the button. I had just lost $100 3-betting ace-jack against a different opponent, so that led me to just see a flop this time, and with 35 in, I found myself wishing I had swapped those two hands when the flop came out Jack, Jack, 7, 2 clubs. The hijack bets out tiny, making it another 15. With my trip jacks, I raise it up to 40 here. He thinks for a second before 3-betting to 130. The little information I've seen on this guy led me to believe that he's capable of firing another barrel without much of a hand. So I decide to let him do just that and just call. So with 295 in, the turn is an offsuit 5, and he bets 185. I figure I might as well raise now. He could have a flush draw that I need to charge, and he could have the case jack, in which case we could just play for stacks right now with the effective stacks being about 1,300. So I make it 400, and he only thinks about it for about a second and mucks. About 30 minutes later, we'd get a limp and a raise to 15 from the hijack. I have ace-8 of clubs in the cutoff and make the call. The button, big blinds, and under the gun limper all call as well. And with 75 in, the flop is 4-4 deuce 2 clubs, giving me the nut flush draw. Original raiser checks, and I bet a green chip here, hoping to possibly drag along a weaker draw that I could overflush. Folds back to the hijack, and he check raises to 75 here. Gonna be hard to put him on a 4, but it's definitely not impossible. But either way, it's an easy call. So with 225 in, the turn is an offsuit ace, giving me top pair for what I've seen from this player. It's going to be hard to get a ton of value here from pairs below my ace. And it's also possible that he has me beat and is going for the rarely seen double check raise. And by the way, I will take this opportunity to mention that I am still in search of seeing, I'm not just saying me doing it, but I'm searching the poker world to find evidence of proof of a successful triple check raise for value in a no-limit game. That's the white whale of poker, and I want to track it down. Anyway, in this case, I bet 40, and he does not check raise, but he does make the call pretty quickly. So with 305 in, the river comes an offsuit 7, and now he checks again. So I don't hit my draw, but I still likely have him beat here with the ace. So I go for $45 worth of thin value, hoping that he doesn't raise, and indeed, he doesn't. He does make the call, creating a $395 pot. I show my hand, and he mucks. We see a few definite recreational players sit down, which I was hoping would happen on New Year's Day, and some big pots among the guys already here. I then got in a hand against one of those players I just mentioned and drilled trips on the river, but clearly wasn't up against anything as she folded almost instantly.
This is a mid-session update. In the immortal words of Tom Berenger, I think for this Niner team, there's only one thing left to do. Win the whole fucking thing.
I lose back about 150, flopping the nut flush draw once again, and once more I would improve to just a pair, but this time it wasn't any good, as I'd find out. By the way, this is a tiny thing, but I like the way the dealers at Aria seemingly never yell at you to put your big blind in if you're on the phone between hands. They just assume you'll get to it, and I appreciate that. That money that I lost to the player 2 to my left in that last hand was quickly recovered when I called his c-bet with pocket 5s and he simply gave up on the turn and river. That wasn't 5th Street Chicken, it was I guess 4th Street Chicken, but I went against his ace-9 that had missed. A new guy sits down and makes it 20 in the low jack, and I have ace-king on the button and decide to make it 60. Small blind cold calls, and the original raiser snap calls. So with 185 in, the flop is 7-6-3 2 spades, and no one bets. Turn is the king of spades, giving me top pair, and now this new player in the low jack bets 60. I could raise here, but I decided against it, and that brings along the small blind. So with 365 in, the river is an offsuit 5. The low jack now bets 220 here. I'd been planning on calling whatever he'd bet on a non-spade, but that sizing gave me second thoughts. I can't imagine either of these guys is going to show up with a 4 too often. And if he has a set, he's not going to bet that much. He's probably not going to bet that much with small flushes, in all honesty, and I don't block any of those. So based on the fact that it was New Year's Day, and it's just really hard to have the nuts, I elected to call and just hope the small blind wouldn't. But after I called, he starts tanking. And at that point, I knew I was screwed. He called as well, creating a three-way showdown in a $1,025 pot, and that is just too big for Ace-King. Ace-King doesn't win $1,000 pots. Ace-King wins $65 pots. I should know this by now. Anyway, my thought about this guy not having a 4 was wrong, but he had better than that to go along with it. He had Ace-4 for the nut flush. That has been a theme on several recent vlogs. I get into hands with aces that I have dominated when I have Ace-King. I hit my hand, and yet I'm still no good. Happened again in this situation, as we get a visit from a familiar face.
And look what we got here. Marco from Chipoya in the house. You have a horseshoe I can borrow?
It's stuck in his...
It's stuck in his?
He's lucky. He's lucky.
It's stuck in his ass. That's what you're saying. He's using it.
He borrowed the horseshoe.
I was thinking about coming to this table just to play A3 offsuit, sir.
The Octo Crab.
The Octo Crab.
Premium hands, always.
So that last hand sucked, but I did enjoy the 49ers post-game Instagram post that I noticed right after I lost that hand. So I then tried my first double barrel bluff of the year. Thought I'd pick the right guy to try it on, but I only ended up donating about $300 to him in the process. That was followed by me just calling a 3-bet preflop with pocket kings. I had a reason for that, but that didn't mean that I didn't end up regretting it when I got a board of queen, 10, 9, 8 with 3 spades and ended up folding the river when I couldn't come up with a single hand I could beat. So that hand, which absolutely disgusted me, came against the grinder on my right, as did this next one. He makes it 15 in the hijack, and I have queens in the cutoff and 3-bet him to 50. Folds back to him. He stares down at my stack before 4-betting to 175. This was definitely the first time he'd 4-bet anyone in the 5 hours I'd been there to this point. But I make the call in position. And with 355 in, the board comes out 9-7 deuce, 2 spades. He stares over at my stack again, and this time bets 100. I had a bad feeling about this, but obviously I got to make this call for 100 here. So with 555 in, the turn is a 10. He looks over to his left and stares at my stack for a third time, getting kind of annoying. This time he decides on a sizing of $275. I was already convinced that he had aces or kings here, and now I can't beat 10s either. So this just kind of cemented the notion with the only hand that I can beat now being pocket jacks or just some sort of random bluff, which he had not shown any propensity on the day to do. I folded the hand, but for the record, I was extremely disgusted about it. I'd keep playing, but would stop rolling video in hopes that that would help turn things around, and in a small way it did when I got action on my 4-bet when I had pocket aces. Unfortunately, I got what you don't want to have happen in that spot, and that is an ace-high flop. 9 out of 10 times when you have pocket aces and you hit a set, that ace is a bad thing for you. It just kills your action. And that's what happened in this spot, though I did indeed win the pot. Wrapping up an unfortunate session at Aria, booking a loss.
All right, wrapping up the session. By the way, I mentioned there was a couple recreational players that jumped in that game, and they were only there for an hour, maybe 2 tops. And one of the grinders, this would have driven a lot of you guys crazy too. One of the grinders that was there and had been there all day and was still there when I left complained that the guy was talking too much. Are you freaking kidding me, bro? You don't want guys who come in and don't play all that well and occasionally talk in your game? What the fuck? It was just mind-blowing. Anyway, as for this session, a $437 loss. Got in some tough spots. Maybe could have played a couple of them better. Hit those like and subscribe buttons, and we'll see you back next time for part 2 of this Vegas trip.
Win the whole fucking thing.